The purpose of the webinar today is to introduce you to the Well-Connected Communities Master Volunteer Program and its curriculum. The webinar is intended to help prepare Wave 1 land-grant universities with content for current trainings of Master Health Volunteers for readiness states in Wave 2 to become familiar with the Well-Connected Communities program and the Health Volunteer program. The program does have some flexibility built in with it as far as naming and branding, and so some of these issues can be worked out with Shay McNeil if you want to contact her after this session. My name is Andy Crocker, and I'm the Extension Program Specialist for Gerontology and Health with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, and along with my colleagues, Dr. Lisa Washburn of Arkansas, Shay McNeil, and Joanne Leatherman with the National 4-H Council, we're going to share some of the fundamentals of the programs with you today. What we put together for the Well-Connected Communities program is based on master or trained volunteer programs that are currently in use in Texas and Arkansas that is going to amount to almost half of the Well-Connected Communities Master Health Volunteer. We welcome your questions as we go along. Please use the question and answer pod or the chat pod. We'll try to keep an eye on that. But also, if there are things that you're not quite sure how to ask or what to ask at this point, we'll be sharing some opportunities with you later on in the program or in the webinar where you can join us for some office hours to have some more in-depth discussion. Extension has welcomed volunteer participation in our programming, for a long time, maybe even since its inception with the use of demonstration farms early on. But the intent with the Well-Connected Communities Master Volunteer is to take it up a level, almost to have a volunteer operate as something as a paraprofessional educator in your community to help leverage extension outreach and education, perhaps to get programming into audiences where we've not had programming before, to reach audiences we've never been able to reach before, or even just to take on some of the tasks, to let the county faculty value his or her time such that really key things that move the agency forward, key things that move the county forward is worth the agent's time, and then some of the one-off or some of the kind of sideline programming that we might be doing otherwise, that it makes sense for a lay leader in the community to take that on. Are all of our volunteers going to be master volunteers? No. And that's okay. We want it to be like that. We want it to be kind of an exclusive process that we value, such that we're being rigorous in who we let into the program, and we're being rigorous with what we task them with. In this first wave of well-connected communities, only the innovator communities are expected to form a Master Health Volunteer program with trained leaders, and implementer communities are to have explored the Master Health Volunteer concept. But I think one of the great things about what we're proposing here today and what we will put into place in this fall is that it's a scalable model. So, if there is interest in your state or in neighboring communities about what you're doing, this should be something that is scalable. The one thing to keep in mind is that the Master Health Volunteers, like all volunteers, within the agencies are there to support, not supplant, the county extension faculty. And so they represent the extension service both at the county and the state, and then as part of this national effort. The information they present has to be accurate, and it needs to be research based, and it needs to be implemented, planned, considered with and through the county extension agent. If the volunteers have questions about materials, they need to talk to the county extension agent, and then, maybe the relevant specialist, and on up the ladder to make sure that material is reliable. But we want to, in this process, try to give the volunteers a certain amount of autonomy, if for no other reason than that's going to help with recruitment and engagement and maintenance. Letting the volunteers have a little bit of autonomy in what they do and how they do it with and through the county extension office and county extension agent. There are
Andy, I'll just jump in. It looks like Joanne is back, so I just wanted you to know you're doing a fine job. But Joanne, you want to test your audio out real quick and just make sure you're able to participate?
Yep, this is Joanne Leatherman, the late Joanne Leatherman.
Okay. No, you sound good.
Oh my goodness, we're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. We're glad to have Joanne with us. She's been the chief cat herder among me and Lisa and our other colleagues with this process. So what can the master volunteers do? Well, just, that's between you and the volunteer. You may have some that, want to do organizational and data management type tasks. You may have some that want to lead community education workshops. You may have some that want to organize health fairs or other events. You may have some that want to be an ambassador in your community. One of the things that human sciences and extension, unlike our many of our counterparts, we don't have a natural commodity group, for lack of a better term, or constituency group. And so our well-connected communities master volunteers can almost be an advocacy group for human sciences in our community, if for no other reason than they're another body or bodies that are out there representing the great work that extension does in the community related to health and families. And so, one of the things, again, to bring back up the idea of autonomy and independence with the volunteers and keeping their interest in the program is working with them to find a role and to find a niche that's going to keep them interested and engaged and committed to extension outreach and education in the community.
Yeah, youth adult partnerships are an essential part of this project. I acquired a passion for youth adult partnerships when I was a county agent, and I've been really pleased to be able to help implement that in my work here at National 4-H Council. We need to remember that youth adult partnership is not a program. It's positive youth development in action, and the youth and adults need to learn to work together. Youth may form a positive relationship in this project with their county extension agent or with another adult master volunteer, which would be ideal. Trust is a really important part of this relationship, and it's done within the context of a long-term association of youth with a caring adult. The content of this training can be handled by youth as well as adult volunteers, so we're not worried about the level of expectation that we have for our youth to take the same training. States interested in Wave 2 readiness may want to consider having a youth-adult partnership training early on. In the resources list attached to the chat box, there is the Building Youth-Adult Partnerships curriculum of Dr. Mary Arnold, which outlines 3 youth-adult partnership trainings, a half a day, a whole day, and a weekend agenda. So in your inventory of your assets for your state, you may want to consider having that training very early in the process. Thanks, Andy. Now for Lisa.
Good afternoon, everybody. Well, this program or this approach is similar to other master volunteer programs in that 40 hours of training is provided. There are a variety of ways that training can be delivered, and so the Well-Connected Communities Volunteer core training will provide a resource for you that can be used either online or as part of a face-to-face training. You might decide that you want to offer training that is all housed at one location, but that the online modules are something that are delivered and discussed in a group, or alternatively, you may decide that you want for your county for folks to do self-study of the online modules. You guys as extension professionals know your counties best and know what will be most acceptable to your audience. All of the training that we'll be discussing today is research or evidence-based, and it relates to health, nutrition, and to other health-related topics. We think that volunteers will find this information to be personally beneficial first. That's one of the reasons they'll be attracted to this program, that they will want to improve their own personal health. And then the volunteerism really kind of can come in later. When we learn something new and we're excited about it, we usually want to share that with other people. And that's one of the concepts or ideas that underlies all of the master volunteer programs that we have through Extension. Volunteers are very valuable to help Extension extend reach. And as Andy mentioned earlier, since the beginning of time in the Cooperative Extension Service, volunteers have been a really key part of our program delivery strategy, whether it was through 4-H or having farmers donate, so to speak, a plot of land for a demonstration, or having extension homemakers or whatever you might call them in your state today to volunteer to extend the information that we have to offer out to additional people. We also expect that volunteers will return 40 hours of service in their community in the first year after receiving their training. We expect that they will report their volunteer hours to their county extension agent using whatever method is deemed most appropriate for your state and your county, and that there will be other project metrics that will be reported to in the project dashboard by you guys who are extension professionals. One of the ways that volunteers can contribute their hours back is through teaching classes, but it's not the only way. Some folks are very well equipped to do direct education, and others might prefer to take another role. And one of the wonderful things about an approach like this is that volunteers, their service can be matched with whatever their strengths and their interests are. Name badges tend to be important to our volunteers because of affiliation as a motivation, and so we'll provide templates for those name badges and for certificates in a communications toolkit. Next slide, please. So this is a suggested timeline for implementation, and given the end of this particular Wave 1 project, this has been a question that we've been asked about quite a bit. Recruitment is something that can start happening now. It might extend into early fall, and as I said already, you as extension professionals know the best avenues for recruitment in your community. You can use your own judgment based on other experiences with volunteer programs or just educational programs in general. For recruiting teens, school is an obvious choice because that's where they tend to gather, and you likely already have relationships with folks within your school systems. You may already have school-based clubs or school enrichment programs, and so listed on the slide are a few of the places where you might recruit volunteers. I would really encourage you, based on my experiences in Arkansas, to look beyond your typical extension volunteer base. Most of the folks that we have recruited in my state have been new to extension. And that was a surprise to us. We really sort of expected our core groups to tag on to this new program that we had going. And we've been able to pull in recent retirees and maybe folks who have scaled back their work hours. Folks who really, want to contribute to their communities but lack a structured way to do that. This is the perfect avenue for folks. Next slide. So here you see two columns, two buckets of content. One is knowledge to be gained, and the other one is skill-based. So what you see here is foundational elements of the Master Volunteer curriculum, and this is what the Master Volunteer team has been working on. So there will be webinars and other resources available to you. This will provide about 40% of the Master Volunteer training. It is our expectation that the remaining 60% will be supported by resources in your state and tailored to what the needs are in your state and in your particular area. There'll be websites and additional printed resources that will be available for you to use. Next slide.
So as Lisa said, the program professional development team that she and I represent, working with Joanne, will account for about 40% of what we're calling foundational training. So, and you saw some of the topics there. The other 60% can come from state health priorities, resources that the state may already have, or issues that are dictated or selected by the communities. And if these are things that still are somehow elusive to you, we're going to share some agendas and training ideas and options that we use in Texas and Arkansas here in a moment, that you can perhaps pull from to craft your own training to make up the rest of that time. Self-study ends up being an important part because it helps to decrease the burden of the training time, both on you, the extension professional, and the volunteer. For people who may be working or trying to go to school or something, it decreases the time that they're in a face-to-face or an online platform and lets them put hands-on with what they're learning. And then there's opportunity for some group activity in Arkansas specifically, and Lisa can provide more information if people need it, but her training cohorts in the counties actually put together a project that they work toward as a volunteer cohort as part of their training. And so, one of the things to consider as you're planning a training or thinking about how this might work in your state is looking at whether that's feasible in your county. But anyway, the almost half of the curriculum is kind of baked into the mix. And then if you need ideas for other parts of it, we have some representative examples. But one of the things that we know that's going to be key to sustaining this effort in your state, in your county, is being able to leverage resources that already exist within the cooperative extension system in your state. And then it helps give the training a little bit more of a local feel. So how do we implement this? Well, one of the things that we've had the benefit of doing here in Texas and are continuing to kind of find the limits of is blending our face-to-face training with a hybrid version of an online curriculum. And so, I would argue, and I'm welcome anybody's feedback. I would argue that, what we're doing today is face-to-face in many ways. Now, it's not quite the same setup as maybe we would use, but, technology and platforms such as this where if we set it up a little different, we could all see each other, we could all watch each other nod or nod, is almost like being in the room together. And so as you look at how a curriculum might be implemented, don't be afraid of technology, even for the face-to-face component of it. But at its core, the face-to-face part of the training allows the volunteers to get to know you, get to know your office, and then it also lets you lay eyes on the volunteers. So it starts to build group cohesion, bonding with the county extension agent, the county extension faculty, the county extension office. And then there may be opportunities to cluster counties together. And so one of the things we did in Texas this year as a pilot effort was we did a statewide face-to-face component where you gathered in your county extension office, and then we linked 45 or 50 offices via a webinar platform, so that it was face-to-face in your local office, but there was one talking head delivering the information to those counties. And one of the things that I would say is we always looked at contiguous counties, but this year we actually encouraged counties, maybe look at linking up with a neighbor to offer the training together, but then using a platform, maybe look at counties that were similar in nature to yours, that maybe were trying to address the same issues, that were maybe geographically similar, or population similar, or resource similar, or something like that. The beauty of the online component is that it does allow for the participation of the working professionals, students, what have you, even those who aren't working professionals. Asking someone to come in for a 30-plus hour face-to-face encounter is tough, and as busy extension professionals, that can also be tough. And so having the online component as an option for your implementation may be beneficial. Even if you think, oh, well, I'll offer face-to-face in my county, that's great. The online component ends up being a backstop then. So if you've got participants who perhaps can't come to one of the sessions, they can make up sessions through online training. Again, the idea that face-to-face has to be all of the people. If you're multi-counties joining together, that 3 counties have to be in the room together. 3 counties could be together on Zoom, or 3 states could be together on Zoom. If several of the states that are in these communities wanted to try to link together, a platform like this provides for a really great opportunity for like in-person interaction. But do consider the online training as an option, because it helps with recruitment, it helps with maintenance, and it helps with engaging the volunteers. I realize that you can't see a lot of detail on this, but this is an example of what we call our menu of implementation options here in Texas. If you go to the Learn event page, which we'll stick in the chat here in a bit, you can download an easier to read version of this. But it identifies what's available as an online course, what's available as an online video, so that if you're having a group session but you don't necessarily want to lead the education, you can push play on a video and it'll come up. And then what is only available is a face-to-face scripted PowerPoint session. And I see Mark put the Learn event in the chat, so check that out. And then we also have an example from our good friends in Arkansas, how they scheduled their training day, and how they break down topics and hours and things like that. So again, as you think to yourself, what in the world would I do to come up with the balance of the training piece? Well, again, look critically at what you have available in your state already. But then if you still need ideas or want to just look at what other states are doing, the examples from Texas and Arkansas are available for you. The other thing that I would say to you as you look at what would constitute the balance of your training options is that online trainings here in Texas are open and available to you. And I can talk more about that if offline or in the office hours that we have scheduled, and we'll have more information about that in a bit. One thing that I do want to kind of plant the seed for, because I think that it's an example of working smarter, not harder, and I think Lisa would agree, and we can debate the relative merits of it later on, is this idea that volunteer training needs to be separate and distinct and apart from the trainings that are provided to county extension agents. And I'm not saying that volunteers need to be trained on all of the things that county extension professionals receive training for in their communities, but where it makes sense, there's no reason that volunteers shouldn't receive the same type, especially, I mean, if we think about these master volunteers as a paraprofessional workforce a little bit, then why wouldn't we want them to have access to the same high quality training and information that we provide to county extension professionals? Again, with the idea that they're going to support, not supplant, the county extension professionals. And so as you're thinking about what a volunteer training might look like, you know, I think it only makes sense that, you know, some training that is, you know, that we would provide to county extension faculty is available for training volunteers. So let's look at what kind of goes into some of the foundational training for the Master Health Volunteers. And again, this is based on experiences in Texas and Arkansas, looking at the needs of the project, looking at, you know, getting to some fundamental knowledge building among the volunteers as part of their training. And so, you know, the first module or what would be early on with the modules is a brief history of extension and a volunteer program overview. As Lisa mentioned, her experience with trained volunteers didn't necessarily come from the ranks of our traditional audiences or our traditional volunteer groups. And I would echo that in Texas, a lot of our volunteers, you know, their first and only interaction with the extension service is through this program. And so building a little bit of a base, helping understand, you know, what the land grant mission is, what is cooperative extension, where have we been, where are we going, and that all kind of happens in this first module. It is written from the perspective of kind of state and federal, and so one of the things that we're cognizant of with how this will be rolled out is discussion prompts to talk about what extension looks like in a particular county or in a particular community, you know, gauge the level of knowledge of the volunteers and help them understand, you know, what makes extension tick in the local community. Then it'll also kind of go through the expectations of the volunteer program, what some of the trainings will look like, and how the program is going to be structured. And all of these things, you know, again, we'll have kind of a base there, and then there will need to be some customization of it as determined by what you plan to do in your community.
What is the culture of health is module 2, and this is designed that once you've learned a little bit, the volunteers have learned a little bit about extension's history, them into what is this culture of health, what are they doing? So the volunteers will learn about the culture of health from the Robert Wood Johnson perspective, and how their work will contribute to the Well-Connected Communities initiative that's being led by Cooperative Extension with support from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. You'll start off with a welcome from Dr. Michelle Rogers from the University of Delaware, who will give a welcome to everyone, and then she will introduce Monica Hobbs-Vinland, who is our Senior Program Officer overseeing this project at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And Monica will help us understand how the culture of health permeates every aspect of our life, enabling people to be their best and thrive, how it contributes to our economy, how it contributes to our national security through a well-trained, healthy military. So this will be part of the early training for the volunteers to have. They'll learn the difference between equitable and equal health opportunities. And there's a really good graphic and explanation of that in Monica's presentation. And then they will help to understand, the volunteers, how important they are in the delivery of the Well-Connected Community Project. And then we close out with Dr. Rogers explaining more about well-connected communities and what we are trying to do over the next years in making our nation a more healthy place in which to live. Next slide, please.
Module 3 is somewhat related to Module 2 in that it addresses the social determinants of health. This will be at a pretty basic level, and it's intended to help volunteers understand how conditions where they help where people live, work, learn, and play affect health outcomes. This module looks at the root causes of common health issues and also describes examples of interventions and programs that address social determinants of health. And maybe most importantly, the module addresses how the social determinants of health can be used in local work through the Master Volunteer Program to help improve health in the community.
The next module looks at finding reliable information, specifically finding reliable information on the internet. And it's really intended to help the volunteers understand that all information is not created equal. And so we'll go through identification of resources, from kind of least reliable to most reliable, and then, learning how to evaluate information based on its reliability, and then applying that framework to an internet search to go through. Again, the idea being, the volunteers are working with and through the county extension office, the county extension professionals, with and through extension produced information perhaps, but part of the autonomy that we're going to build into keeping interest in the program is to let the volunteers strike out a little bit on their own with identifying needs, evaluating information, and then partnering with the county extension agent to determine its validity and applicability in the community. And so helping them understand how to find reliable information is important for that.
Then we're going to expose the volunteers, be they youth or adult, to how important the youth-adult partnerships are in this project. Youth in this project will be equal partners with the adults in discussions, program planning, implementation, and evaluation, with the adults serving as mentors and role models. This doesn't mean that the adults have to accept everything that the youth bring to the table, but there are ways to discuss things and help the youth understand that their perspective is valued, even though it may not be the popular discussion topic of the evening at the Wellness Council. We anticipate that in the innovator communities where wellness councils may already be established, that youth-adult partnerships may be an invaluable training as they learn to accept all the unique assets that youth bring to the table, and also what adults bring to the table. It's a 50-50 playing field. We need to look at youth as having fresh ideas, unique skills, and the energy to be engaged as current leaders. Youth are not just future leaders, but they can be current leaders and bring new things to the table for everyone to talk about. But then the youth also need to understand that adults have life experiences and perspectives that will help them learn to be better leaders themselves. And everyone needs to understand that youth-adult partnership relationships are based in mutual trust. And those are the objectives that we hope to achieve in this module.
We have a module that addresses health behavior theory. And the reason that we have a module like this is because theory underpins health programs and interventions, whether we're doing something that is direct education or a different approach. And it's important to have a basic understanding of theory and the various models that are commonly used. So this module defines theory and why it's important in program planning and implementation. It discusses using behavior change theory to understand health behavior at individual, interpersonal, and community levels of the social ecological model. And then these theories will be applied to master volunteer work through this program. In particular, we talk through the health belief model and the trans-theoretical model, or stages of change, and then look at the social ecological model and the different levels of influence on our personal health and the health of others. Is this my slide and I missed it?
No, Joanne's muted.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, later this summer, we'll be rolling out some more modules. If you need this information in the interim and you want to connect with us, we can connect you to the online Texas Master Wellness Volunteer Curriculum for some of it, or we can help you with their resources if you're moving faster than we are. But basically, by the end of the summer, we should have chronic disease, principles of adult learning, principles of youth learning, and exercise recommendations ready to roll. And then under the skills area, marketing, branding, public speaking or demonstrations, and the cultural competency or diversity. In the chat box, we have links for the documents that we've already prepared. Mark has been kind enough to flash those up on the screen as we've moved through this webinar under the Learn Event platform. And also a copy of this PowerPoint will be available if it will be helpful. So you'll find frequently asked questions for the Well-Connected Communities Master Program. This FAQ is a living document. We'll continue to add questions from this webinar, questions that we're going to get during the June 28th office hours. So it will be a document that will continue to have content added to it. The sample training agendas from Texas and Arkansas will be available in readable format. And then we've been compiling an ongoing training resource document starting with the February training with links to videos, PowerPoints, curricula, and additional online resources that you can access if it will be helpful to you as you develop your program.
We have some additional opportunities for you. The next set of office hours on Zoom will be June 28th at 10 and at 2 Eastern time. And if you've not checked in on an office hour session before, they're really informal. We just chat with whomever comes in and answer questions as they come up. It's a nice time of sharing too between participants. So I encourage you, if you've got time during one of those two slots, to participate. You do need to register, and there's a link on the screen to register for those office hours, and then you'll get the meeting information after you signed up. Stay tuned for when the rest of the online curriculum will be introduced. We are really hard at work to produce a very nice product for you and for your volunteers. So look for an announcement in the late summer or early fall. And now I think we have some time for questions. Are there any questions that have been put into the chat pod?
Nope, none at this time. And usually what I tell folks is, we'll give folks a minute or two, and if there's not any, then we can wrap things up.
There is one that just appeared from Belinda.
Belinda says, has there been a decision made on a definite name of this program and title of leaders?
The definite name of the program is Well-Connected Communities Master Volunteer Program. If some feedback that we got early on was that some states did not like the word master. So if you have challenges with that part of the name, if you would please let Shay McNeil know, so we can keep track of the various names. So these will be Well-Connected Community Master Volunteers.
And while we're waiting these last final seconds, any closing thoughts, Joanne or others? Okay.
None, except, please do whatever questions you didn't have today, jot them down or come prepared to the office hours, June 28th. The registration link is in the chat pod. Lisa, Joanne, and I are available if you have questions in the interim. And the recording of this should be posted to the Learn event page soon. So if you missed something or want to rewatch or share, it's available to you.